Hello and welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful. I'm in the studio today working on my series called Gel Print Art. And so if you're just joining me for the very first time, welcome. I hope that you enjoy this video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment down below and say hi, and click on the subscribe button and the little bell, and then you'll receive a notification when I post a new video. So I've been working on a series. This is episode 4 on making things with my gel prints. So if you're new to gel printing, that's okay. I cover that in the second video. The first video is in the series is actually showing you some of the art projects that I came up with using my gel prints. So this is just a little cradle to hang on the wall, a little art piece. And I started out, I think the first thing I made with doing this technique was these little vessels to hold pens and brushes and that kind of thing. I have a whole bunch of those. And then I also made some cards, some little individual art pieces, just little blank cards, and even some little miniature art pieces that are actually little magnets that you can use. So I'm hoping to come up with some more ideas as I go along. I think one, in fact, I don't know if I showed this in the first video even an art piece in a shadow box using found objects. So I wanted to kind of share how I get to that point to even be creating the art. So this series started out with the first video showing some of the projects that I had made that I'll be covering in the series. And then the second video, which was actually kind of the first actual working video, was making gel prints. So I ended up in a session that lasted 2 days. I ended up with 72 gel prints. And then for those of you who don't have the equipment or want to do the actual gel printing, I put together a digital kit that's in my Etsy shop. There'll be a link down below for that as well, that has 36 of my favorite, lot of variety of color of digital, so that you can print them out at home and still be able to do these projects. So that's also available. Again, a link will be down below for that. Including this playlist for this whole series. So there are a couple of older videos that kind of cover the subject that are much older, and I've left them in there because they might be of interest to watch too. But for this actual series, start to finish, this is video number 4. So this is, I would say, the most important video in this whole series, because without doing the steps that we're going to do today in this video, you won't be able to do these projects. So this is kind of a critical step. The end, what you want to watch all the way to the end, because towards the end, there will be probably the most important step, even in today's video, that is critical to successfully creating these art projects. So I kind of started in the last video, or ended in the last video with kind of what I'm going to do also in the beginning of this one. In case you did not see that, it will make this make sense, and I can cover maybe a little more detail than I did in the previous video. So like I said, I ended up with 72 gel prints, and these were done, if you did not watch the previous 2, these were done on either 8.5 by 11, just regular printer paper, 20-pound printer paper, or 9 by 12 rice paper. So I had random different sizes. And to clean those up, we covered that in the second video, just tearing off all the white edges because I was using an 8 by 10 gel plate. So I wanted to have these leftover white pieces in order to do these projects. So it makes you use up every little scrap, and then you still have all of these nice size pieces for other projects, for collage, that kind of thing. And they're easier to store because they're smaller now and all kind of the same-ish size. So with 72 of those sheets, once I tore off all the edges, then in the last video, which was episode 3, I showed how to 2 different methods that I put together. These ended up with these sheets of new striped paper. So these are the things that we're going to use to create all those other projects. So you need to watch the previous video if you're not to this point so that you end up with a bunch of stripy papers. So what I end up with are some that are thinner there's no other substrate. They're thinner. These are better to use for these vessels because they wrap nicely. And then I also use the thinner ones for around the edge here. I think for this you could go either way. And then the thicker ones where I did use a substrate, those end up being a heavier cardstock weight. And those I use to do the cards, the magnets, the front pieces of the artwork. You can even, use some of the collage papers we'll be using also. So I like having this variety all the way from my thin actual collage papers to these two weights of striped papers that we end up with. So today we're going to be taking it to the next step. And like I said, this is the most important step in the process. So hopefully you've been following along and you have a bunch of stripy papers to work with. I ended up, just for fun, I'm kind of keeping track to see in the end how many projects I end up with this batch. Like I said, I did gel printing over 2 days and came up with 72 sheets. When I trimmed those down and used every piece, just about, I think I had a few left over, I ended up with 22 sheets of striped paper. So that's quite a few projects, okay? So you ended up, when I finished, because I didn't do all of this on camera, but you can see they're just very colorful. You can do a simpler palette if you want, if you're trying to do a simpler color scheme. I don't know if I showed that, but picking just a few colors so that they, look more pastel, or maybe kind of some more earth tone colors. These are some kind of southwestern looking colors, and then even just neutrals. So you don't have to do the whole colorful thing like I do, but that's just my aesthetic. So I ended up, like I said, with 22 sheets. These are the thicker ones. And just by, randomly trying not to put too much thought into it, and just creating some, we'll call this our background, because we're going to be doing more to that. Okay, so my next step is to do mark making on them, doodling, that kind of thing. So today in this video, I'm going to kind of address it like I always try to do towards beginners. So if you have a lot of experience doodling, you probably have certain go-to marks that you like to make, and so this will come very easy to you. If you don't have a lot of experience and are kind of, where do I even begin? I'm going to show you some of that today and show you my methods of kind of not being intimidated by how much this looks like, how much work this looks like, by breaking it down into smaller, easier bites, I guess. So some of these I have actually done quite a bit on, and some I have done very little, just so I can kind of show you the example. So what we're going for are just doodling, bringing more detail to these striped papers, and you can kind of see, it breaks it up to have little more details on it than just plain. If you don't want to doodle and you don't like to doodle or mark make, you can use them just like they are. They're just going to be much simpler. And to me, in my mind, the more layers that you add, the more detail you get, there's just so much more to look at and so much more interest and detail to your finished piece if you do go ahead and do all your mark making. So I approach it, I'm going to kind of go over some of the pens that I use in case you're just starting out. You don't have to have all these things. I have a bin over here I'll show you that I use to carry around with me so I can move it from place to place and work on these. So maybe I'll start with some of the materials that I use, and then we'll get into actually showing you that kind of my approach. So I carry around this large bin. It is something I picked up at Walmart. It's called an art bin. I will maybe try to find something and give you a link for Amazon to find this, but it wasn't, hugely expensive. It had a nice place for Posca pen size markers. And then I took out the little divider they had here, and I just added some of my little vessels to corral some of these other pens and just kind of fit them in. So I have a variety. of things that I like to use. If you're just starting out, like I said, start with simple, and I would use just some black pens. That's kind of where I start, and using different sizes are kind of what will help give you more movement and interest in your mark making. So these are from Posca. These paint pens, they're acrylic paint. So if you have not used these, I will put links down below. You can find some of them in individual colors, but then you can also find sets. So if you don't have any, you may have things like that already, but if you don't and you just want to start out with getting black, you can sometimes find them in different sizes of just black, and sometimes black and white. So then you end up with those two. So that's where I would start. This is the thicker one. A 5M is the size. This one is a 3M. And then this is a 1MR. And there may be another size. Let's see, in between here. Yes, there's a 1M also. So that would be 4 sizes of the Posca pens. And then the other thing in black that I like are these Unipin fine liners. These also work well. And these you can also get in sets that have different sizes. And so you can do different size of mark making also. I pulled out just the number 05. It's kind of a medium-ish tip. And so that's kind of one that I use a lot. The sizes 08 is a little larger, and then there's a 10, I think. And then there's some really small ones, 03, 01, and then 003 and 005. So just a variety of sizes. I'm just going to pick out a few of those. You can also use these. These are micron pens. I don't use these as much as these for what we're going to be doing. We're going over acrylic paint in our mark making, and so paint pens work great because you can layer them over and they're opaque. The other thing that I like to use is white. So you can also find these. I didn't pull them all out, but you can get them in all different colors, like I said, and white. So those will work also in the different sizes. But I end up, seemingly for the white, doing more cleanup with that and using just a finer pen. So I really like the Jelly Roll pen, and this is a size 10. They may all be the same size, I think. So they may do a finer one or not, but this is just like a little gel pen. And I really like how these work. So you can buy packs of white. I use white a lot. You can also use Uniball Signo broad pens, and those are also work really well, and they're just, again, a ballpoint type pen. So Jelly Roll, they also come in colors, and these are a metallic. They're called Moonlight is the pack that they were in. So there's a variety of colors. I didn't pull them all out, but just a variety of kind of pastel-y colors in kind of metallic, but then they also have the glitter ones. So those I kind of like because they give you that little bit of sparkle to outline and that kind of thing. So I like the Jelly Roll pens. And then these are also, you can get these, usually they come, I think you can maybe get them individually, just white, but they often come in a set of white, silver, and gold. So I have those. Then they also sometimes have colors. You can get them in sets of colors. These are a couple of the colors. These are the same brand, but the pen is a little bit different. They're still Uniball Signo, but you can see they're a little bit different. But those are all in metallic also, so there's kind of a copper, another gold. And some of the golds, even if it's same brand, from the type of pen it is, the color of gold might be a little bit different. So I even like a variety of gold. Some of them have a little bit more green in them. Then I also have these are just some from, I think, from Walmart. Royal and Langnickel is a brand that they carry. And these are just a set of acrylic markers too. But then they have kind of more of a normal tip. Those are great for making dots and lines and things. It's kind of a medium size. And then I also have, somebody had asked me about these in one of my comments. Because they saw the bright colors. I think these are the ones they were talking about. It could have been these, but this is a really inexpensive brand of glittery pens, and there's even some neon colors. They're from, the brand is King Art, and it's a brand also that Walmart carries in their little art section that they have. They don't work as well as the Jelly Roll pens. I don't think they flow as nicely. They seem to dry up quicker, but I can, you know, I still use them. There's some colors in here that I don't find in elsewhere, these kind of bronzy and copper colors that I really like. So I kind of, they're a little more frustrating, but I still try to use them. And then the other ones by that brand that are also inexpensive. So like if you're just starting out and you don't have a lot of money to spend on all these things, I would stick to the basics, even just getting the metallics. These are all readily available. And then these are also from King Art, and these are metallic, and they have a dual tip, which is kind of nice. Now the first set I bought, I didn't pay attention and look in the package before I bought it, and this one end, they were all damaged. And so I don't know if it happened in manufacturing. So just, you can see them kind of through the packaging. They come in a clear package. So just kind of eyeball and make sure those are not smushed in there. And then the other end is a brush tip also. So these are, I really like, they flow nicely. So I may be using some of these too. So we just have a variety of pens to do pen work on here. So my process when I do these, two things: you want to have some kind of piece of paper. This is actually a piece of watercolor paper. This is what I have been using. And it's just to kind of activate. You know, sometimes I need to push the little thing and I know it's going to spread out. So this is kind of my messy paper. And also you maybe need to check a color, because most of these metallic ones, especially, what you see through the pen or the cap is not what the color is. So I like to test it out before I go to my project, make sure it's flowing nice and all of that. So I'm just going to use a smaller one here today. This is just some mixed media paper, and I'll end up, you know, recycling it or using it for something. So I'm going to sit down here and hopefully be in frame and maybe try to get in here a little bit closer and just show you some of the things that I've done. So if you watched the last video, you know all the steps. Hopefully you watched it to the end, because there are steps as you go along that are kind of important that you don't want to miss. So one of the things that I did not do originally a year or so ago when I started making these, I don't know if you could even see this through here, but the white spaces in between, see how they kind of have a grayish sort of look to them? These were rice paper. And so rice paper is very absorbent. And when you go to use pens, the acrylic markers, paint pens, work better and are more opaque. But if you are using this type of pen, even the blacks especially, not maybe necessarily the metallics, but those will bleed. And we have been tearing our paper. When I tore the strips and cleaned them off, I used a ruler. And so you end up with this kind of fuzzier edge, which kind of wicks up the pen ink also. So you get more imperfection and just kind of a less professional look. That way, if you don't do this step that I showed you in the last video, which was to use a clear gesso, it could be any brand, this is just one I had, and you're gonna paint over the in-betweens, the white space that we're going to be doodling over the whole thing, but you have paint on this area already, which acts as a primer. But in between those white edges where there was no paint, you want to prime those with clear gesso, because it will give kind of a barrier and you won't get all that absorbency. Now it might a little bit, and this isn't really thin, but if you do a nice coat, then I'm going to be able to do my mark making on this, and it's going to be more crisp. On the areas that it was just the copy paper, maybe not as important, but I went ahead and just did all of them. And it did make my pen inks and all of that flow and just more smooth when I did that versus a year or so ago when I didn't. So that to me is an important step. And then when I'm looking at these, if you are someone, like I said, who doodles a lot, you're going to look at this and you have your marks and you kind of just do it intuitively and don't put a lot of thought into it. I try not to overthink it. I can be an overthinker, so I am going to share with you how I think, but just have fun with it. It's really intended to be therapeutic and relaxing. I just, in the evenings, I can sit and do this all day for one thing, listening to music, but then in the evenings, I might just be listening to the TV. I'm not really watching because I'm busy doing this. I'm kind of somebody who likes to have noise in the background, and so I'll just sit and doodle for hours on end. Now, one of these sheets, I've never had timed myself before because I'm just not really paying attention. But I thought for fun, just to kind of see how long it takes to do things, I went ahead and did a few of these start to finish. And I would say it took 3 to 4 hours even for me to do that, where I'm kind of moving along the whole time. So this is something that's not a quick project, but it's a lot of fun. So what I tend to do though is, like I said, I don't normally go start to finish on one, but you'll get to your projects, your other part of your projects sooner if you do that. But what I tend to do, because you're working with markers that are wet, paint pens that are wet, is I will maybe grab one color and I will find some areas on one that I can use that color, and then I'll set that aside to dry and grab another one and use the same color, the same pen that I'm working with, and do the same thing. And so I might work on this whole stack are ones that are started but not finished. And then these I have already pretty much done enough. Oh wait, not this one. But I could always, continue and do more on them. So the other thing that I do is, it's kind of like breaking in your page. If you're looking at a piece of blank white paper and you don't know where to start, you'll see people like scribbling with a pencil and then doing their collage over it and that kind of thing, just to kind of loosen up. So for this kind of project, you already have, your stripe color, so you have kind of something to be your guide. But even then, you kind of look at it like, where do I start? So what I do is I will take my black pens, different sizes. And like in this one, I have started with the large pen. And because we don't know what we're going to do with this down the line, there will be pieces that are, depending on how large the piece is, we might be cutting something up this big, but then we might end up be cutting up something this big, so you don't really know which section you're going to see in the end project. So I just take the largest one and I'll alternate. So I have evened out. I've used the large one and made some lines. And then I used the large one and did a different design, but I put some space between it. And then I skipped another one and I did another design, and I just did dots and then larger dots. So I tend to just do dots, lines, and circles in different shapes. And that kind of takes it down to a really simplified, what you're going to do. And so I'll start with that, and they're just pretty, I don't want to say childlike still, but they're everything's still very bold looking. I would call this very bold, simple, and then even when you've added this, you've added a little bit of detail, but it's still very bold and simple. So in here now, I would take a smaller pen, and this one's kind of this is the next size down. So I may have used it in some. It looks like maybe this size, but I would alternate what I do. So maybe here I don't have any circles, so maybe here I would do circles. Now this pen is kind of looking very similar to the other size, and I kind of try to gear the pen to the size of the space that I have. If I tried to do big circles with the bigger pen, they're going to end up being dots because the nib is so large. So I do this. Sometimes if I want them to look really wonky, I will do a circle one direction with my hand, and then this one I'll go the opposite direction. And that will make them a little more irregular. To me, if you're doing this and it's not going to be perfect, so I like to maybe make them look a little irregular on purpose. And I just fill up that white space. So then I might take the smaller pen, and then here I have a lot less room at one end, but larger on this end. So sometimes when I do that, I may do two different patterns. Like I have these big dots here and dots here, but I really don't have any dots here. So I could get away with actually using, let's see, this is an even smaller size. Maybe I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this as a smaller size, and I'm just going to maybe do kind of a wavy line. You could stitch this on your sewing machine. I covered that a little bit in the last one. So I'm making kind of just a little snaky looking line here. But then maybe when I get here, I want to fill that in. I could keep my snaky line going, since that's what I started with, and just make them bigger snake and fill that all in. The other thing I like to do when I have spaces like this is do a lot of really close little wonky lines and let them grow into that space. And then here again, I have some thicker lines, so I could use again this one, or maybe even the smaller one. And do, this one would have been maybe a good one to do my wiggly lines, which you don't really see here so much because I kind of already have a wiggly thing going. So I might take this over to my sewing machine actually later and do a couple of overlapping wiggly lines, kind of like I did in this one, because I like that look too. So that would be something black. So I'm going to skip this one and do it on my sewing machine. So then here, again, I could do circles. I could do a wavy thing. I could create a new pattern. Sometimes I'll get, so these are like oblong circles. Let's see what else I have in here. I could do a thinner zigzag. I could do an alternating pattern, something like this. So maybe let's do that in this one. Okay, so let's do some just quick lines. And maybe I count how many I do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then maybe I do 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. So I just filled all that in. So you can see you have a nice variation in size. And that's going to be nice because when you cut that up, every row isn't the same. So again, then I would just pick something different and do in this one. So I'm not going to do all of this on camera, but you get the gist. So that's kind of an easy first step to do, just to break your paper. And then what I would do is I start looking at other things on here. Now, one thing that I sometimes do is if my circles were really uneven, sometimes I do this now, or I'll wait until later when I've kind of decided if I want, maybe I want the inside of this to be a color, or maybe I don't want it to be a color. You can either way, if you do white first, you can always add a color on top later. So one trick, and I'm going to do it on this one just so you can see what I do, but I would take my white pen, maybe I go back with a smaller pen if I want to clean anything up. You know, maybe I kind of went over there's an edge here where they're glued together, and like here the glue has kind of come up, which will get fixed later on when we use it. But sometimes I'm just kind of want to be too much of a perfectionist and just fix something that looks like it might have been a really mistake. It's okay for them to be wonky. Then the other thing that I'll do is I'll take my white pen, and you can kind of see where there's this little bit. Those sometimes bug me, and maybe I want them to look a little bit more uniform, a little more professional. Then I will take the white pen and I'll just go and make a nice clean dot in the center of these. And again, I'm going to leave them being wonky, but you'll see that even though it's a white pen, the color of white, it's still a color. It's different than this background paper. And so it makes it look like I put a dot inside, even though it's white. I put a dot of gel inside these circles, and it just makes them look a little bit better. So I'm going to show you the difference. I've only done those first 6 or so, but you can kind of see how these over here look, compared to how nice and tidy those look. And they're just a brighter white, and they also have, when we're finished, a little bit of a shine to them from the ink. So I would go and make this row, and it's just going to look a little bit better if you do that. So it's just kind of that one little detail. And again, you know, I'm just kind of meditative and relaxing when I do this. And in the big picture, at the end of the day, I don't know if anyone's going to look so close at all these to, you know, be like, oh, wow, they did that or not. I know I did. I think in the end, it does make it look very more professional and less messy, maybe. So I do like to, I'm a detail person, if you have not noticed. That's why I like doing all this little intricate work. If you're not that way, it may drive you crazy. It may not be your thing. But it's just how I am. And I know not everyone's the same, but I do like all the little, I think they matter in the end to me. So, plus I think it keeps you, you know, we're not getting any younger. And I think it's really good for my fine motor skills and all that kind of stuff my hands aren't shaking yet in life. So it kind of keeps me calm. So if you can't, you know, if you have any kind of tremor issues, then this might not be your cup of tea. Okay, so I just think that ends up looking more finished. I don't know how focused I am here in the end. So I like how that looks. Okay, so I'm going to put this one aside. That needs to dry. Now, when I'm working here on my craft table, I can use my heat gun and dry things so that I don't smudge. The other tip, if you don't have a heat gun or you're working somewhere where you don't have it handy, is I will work one end, and while that dries, I will work the other end. If I was smart, I would start in the middle and work my way down so my hand is not back into my whatever I was doing. But sometimes, you know, you're working intuitively, and so I might want to work on something here because that's what grabbed me next. And, oh, I'm not in brain here, sorry. I might want to be working here because that's intuitively what I wanted to do next. So the other place you can do a similar thing, I think I have one where I did, is I did this similar kind of thing even with my zigzag, where I took the white, because sometimes, you know, these are gel prints and you will have imperfections, you know, where there's paint here outside the thing, or there's paint here, you see. So I'm seeing all this nice white line, and then all of a sudden I have blue in there. So what I do is you can take and clean that up too, and now I have like this really nice white edge. Sometimes I'll do, like I may on the top side then do a metallic pen, and then you end up with like 3 stripes in your zigzag. Let's see if I have something. Here's one where I had done some gold in there. And then sometimes, because of the size, I could go back and now put a white dot at the bottom of that gold, and it would make that look more consistent and finish, and that would look really nice. So I kind of start with the basic mark making in black, clean anything up in white or metallic, and then I start looking at the colored stripes. And like I said, I will maybe take one color of a pen and use it in multiple while I have this one pen. So I try to use it throughout a paper at least 3 times. So we can call that my rule of 3. It's not really a rule. It could be 5, it could be 2. But I just kind of, while I have the pen, it kind of, because these are all such random colors that I put together, using your pen work and repeating it, different scale, like I said, size of line, that kind of thing, shape, but having it there in multiple places, it kind of makes everything become cohesive, even if you have just really disjointed colors that you're working with. So I will do that. I will take, for example, if I wanted to do something purple somewhere, maybe I wanted to outline these in purple or put some dots, I would go and do it somewhere else that purple looks good with, like with the orange or the blue or green, whatever. So I really like to mix up my colors a lot. I start out a lot of times timid, and I will do something just as basic as outlining something in, I think this first one I had outlined in gold, and then I picked a more coppery color and outlined again on top of the purple. But you could, same here, is I started out outlining just in the gold, and then I took kind of a metallic pink color and went inside of that. So the more layers you add, it's kind of like I start with basic details. You know, I would start maybe outlining all these circles in a color and then embellishing that again. So it's kind of adding a next layer and then another more detailed layer. And then you can even go to more and more detail. For example, these were circles that were just, you know, big dots like these. Just big dots where I've outlined in a blue, similar to what's there. You don't really notice the difference too much. But now I could add another thing. I could add gold or silver or something around that, and then you're going to see that darker blue color better, the outline that I used. And then you could add more details to this. I've done some of these that look like, you know, kind of a swirly with a sunburst, kind of adding other colors to it. I did some where one that looked like some that I added, you know, some kind of two borders with some little spokey wheel lines and then a flower inside. So it's just, again, you start out simple and then fill in places. And you don't have to do it on every one, but you know, this was kind of a honeycomb kind of pattern, and I ended up adding lines inside and then adding dots. And you know, this zigzag ended up getting some color. You know, it was white in between before. So I just keep adding until you feel like you're finished. And, you know, some of them, like I could leave this one, but I haven't done anything here. I can do something there. I can do more here, you know. So it's just, like I said, start having fun with all the colors that you have. You may not have that many colors, and that's also fine. I think when I started out these, I don't even know if I have much color, mostly black and white and metallic. And then I did have a few paint pens at the time, but I did these a long time ago. This one's pretty simple, actually. This one doesn't have a lot done on it. So you're just going to kind of be intuitive about what you're working on, and you'll decide when you think it's finished. Okay, so which takes me to the most important part of this. You have to remember we are working on acrylic paint, and then we've added sometimes acrylic paint, but sometimes pen. And these gel pens and sparkly pens and all this are all water soluble. So we can't just go and do decoupage and this was paper mache. You can't go and get this wet, right? If you do, you're going to wipe away all of your pen marks. So you've done all this work, and then you put a brush on it and you just smeared and mixed all of the water soluble things that you put on here. So let me back up 1 second. If you do make a mistake, you're doing something and you decide you didn't like it, like say I chose a color and I started embellishing these circles and I didn't like it at all, you can just use a baby wipe and you will be able to wipe that away. You have to do it pretty quick if it's the acrylic paint markers, because those dry faster and it is acrylic paint. But you can, you know, with a little more effort, get that off too. But any of these pens, these metallic pens, these will all wipe off very easily. So what we have to do before we can actually create any projects, now that we have our papers, is we have to seal this. And you can't brush something on, because if you brush it on, you're going to brush off your color. You're going to end up mixing it, and you're going to end up, say I had done this with some pink something and I took a brush with wet, I'm going to now drag all that pink ink across my paper. So you need to spray it on. So I use this Krylon Camar varnish, and it is specifically for art. So it will work on oil, acrylic, watercolor. And it also works on, because the water soluble, it works on any water soluble. Maybe you've used colored pencils on this. I haven't done that, but you could use colored pencils or water soluble colored pencils, that you get wet and kind of create a more painterly effect. You can do anything you want on these. Okay. I'm just showing you what I did, but you could, you could do something totally different than what this design is. I could take this and paint on a vine with flowers and have this just be kind of a background to it. What I had tended to do was to embellish what was already there and not do something totally different on top of it. Regardless, you want to spray it sealed before we do any next steps, or you're going to ruin your artwork. So spray this, just a couple of quick, do it outside. Obviously it's aerosol, so protection and all that. So just spray a couple of thin layers. You don't put it on heavy. The nice thing about it is it's going to protect the work we already did. And I have sprayed, people always ask me, how do you get your paper shiny? I don't know if you can tell this. Did you see that shine? Even on the parts I didn't do anything, that is because I have sprayed this one. I think I also sprayed this one. I think I sprayed 4 of them. I think I sprayed this one. And you can see compared to this paper, it's going to get metallic wherever I used metallic. It's shiny, but I have not sealed this. So you want to seal that. This one I think I sealed all. I don't think I sealed that one. That one's not finished. I sealed this one. So you can tell these all have that little bit of a sheen to them. Okay. So the nice thing is these are protected. I can start working with them and creating something. This one could totally be ready to go to be made onto one of my vessels. This is the first project I did with my scraps, was creating these. I also have some little journals, little mini ones that I did not in this exact way. I did use scraps and I tore them with tearing rulers that have shapes, and that video is somewhere. But I may, doing it with these type papers, I may also make some journal covers, because that's kind of a no-brainer. But I'll be getting to those different projects now in the next video starting. I don't know which one I'll pick first. So maybe tell me in the comments which one you'd like to see first, and we can go from there. Part of how I decide when I now want to start cutting these up is what I want to use it for, and kind of be aware so that I know, I could make a vessel this tall, and then I'm going to have this scrap. So maybe if I know I'm going to do some cards, which would be actually on the thicker paper, but you could use this too, is I would make sure that whatever scrap is the size I want it to be for another project. And then this part I would use for a vessel and make my vessel be that high. Same as I could just know that I'm going to do 2 vessels. I will just cut this in half. Well, it wouldn't cut it in half. They'd be pretty short because you have to wrap them under. But I would know that if I make a vessel this side, I'm going to have a scrap of some size that's going to end up being a part of another project. So I do kind of think about that. But I want to get some of these done, spray them, and then we'll be ready to go for next project. So I wanted to get some, like I said, done start to finish so that I can move along, because it's going to take me a while to get all of these doodled on. If you know me and know I've been doing this a while, these are the piles of other ones that I have been working on for a long time. So that's where we are. You want to spray, varnish those, let those dry. The nice thing is, even after we've cut these up to do on our other projects, say probably, for example, these cards, that kind of thing, or maybe even the magnets or bookmarks, whatever you're going to do, you might cut them up and then decide you want to do more work, pen work on it, because it's more of a focal point or something like that. The nice thing is you can still go over this again with more pen work, and it's actually really nice and smooth with all your pens. So you can do that, and then you just need to spray it, seal it again before you do your project, because most of these projects, in some way, you are probably going to be getting this wet with glue. For sure, we are on this, because you can obviously see how glossy these are. So you want to make sure you're sealed before you move along. Okay, so this has been quite a long video. I hope you learned something and that you're inspired to, get out your pens and start doing the details on all of these. And then we're going to be ready to go with some projects, because I have a few that are are just about ready. So that's it for me today. Have a great rest of your day. Now go make something. Bye.